Snaking its way through the countryside of Southern Virginia, this beautiful 3.2-mile strip of asphalt has been around since 1957. But now, for the second time in 3 years, the Virginia International Raceway is home to the SCCA National Championship Runoffs.
Welcome everybody to Virginia International Raceway for the 59th running of the SCCA National Championship Runoffs. Coming up is the Run for the Gold in STU, Super Touring Under. And right as we came up, you saw a EV vehicle going counter race. You don't see that very often. They're doing a little bit of cleanup as it is wet. The rain is picking up, but more importantly here, the wind is starting to pick up significantly here as you take a look at the car of the gentleman who will be starting on pole, and that is Johan Schwartz out of Huntersville, North Carolina, driving the Van Steenberg Performance Porsche 944. There's Joe Moser in the Honda CRX SI, and some of the rest of the field right there. We're looking forward to this one. This is going to be 15 laps or 40 minutes, whatever comes first. And the story here is obviously we are getting Hurricane Ian has turned back in off of the Atlantic now and is starting to hit here in the South Carolina coast. We are feeling the outer bands of it. The rain is picking up. The wind is getting really strong. We're getting wind gusts now up over almost approaching 30 miles an hour, and it's just going to continue to get stronger. Obviously, all of our thoughts go out to everybody in South Florida on the western coast for surviving what they've done and what they're going to have to deal with. But up here, we are going racing, and this is, one, an incredible track. Two, in these conditions, it's going to be incredibly demanding and difficult. But one of the great things, Tom O'Gorman, sitting alongside me here, about the STU category is this one is, you simply can describe as variety is truly the spice of life.
Greg, I don't even know where the storylines start with this one because it is the most diverse class, I think, by far that we have here in SCCA Club Racing. Of course, super touring, meaning mostly bolt-on parts, production-based cars. These are under, I believe it's 3 liters or maybe 2.5 liters. But it is basically displacement, power-to-weight based builds. So we have everything from Porsche 944s, Dodge Neon SRT 4s, through WRX STIs, Mazda Miatas, Civics with swapped engines. There's literally everything in this class. Lotus Exiges. It's the only class that we have front, rear, mid-engine, front engine, everything represented. And add in the variable of what we're looking at now: windy, rainy, unknown conditions with some of the deepest talent on the grid as well. This is going to be a spectacular race to see who figures this thing out, because we don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, look at this shot through the snake, but you can see the camera dancing and bouncing in this wind. It is stout out there. I'm Greg Creamer. That was Tom O'Gorman, third member of our team, Haywood Wagner. He is down and in the elements. Hayward, what are you looking at for STU?
It is a beautiful day here at VIR, Greg. We are loving every minute of it. This is a great field. Tom already talked about the diversity. I don't know if he said all-wheel drive, but we have several all-wheel drive cars on this grid. The two that everyone are looking at right now, that black Porsche 944, beautiful car, belongs to Kip Van Steenberg. Kip met his driver here when they were on the Team USA karting team in Portugal. I talked to Kip a little bit about that experience. He said, yeah, it rains in Portugal just a bit. Right beside him, the bright orange CRX of Joe Moser. Joe is known as a guy who can really get a lot of power out of those cars, really make them handle. He's wishing he had his Prelude right now, a little bit longer wheelbase. He told me that the wet, the little orange CRX is built to go backwards. So keep an eye on those two in turn one. Joe knows he's got to get ahead of the Porsche if he wants to stay there.
All right, yeah, and you're absolutely right. The all-wheel drive cars, and one of the big stories involves one of the all-wheel drive cars. Chip Herr had originally qualified in the 7th spot in his all-wheel drive X-World Challenge touring car Audi, and everybody was thinking, boy, this is going to be a great opportunity for him. But he's had some issues, and he's had to swap cars, Tom. Yeah, and it was really not kind of going his way already. He qualified 7th on the grid, and he was about 3 seconds off pace, so it was not really looking like it was going to be his race in the dry. But we were anticipating this weather the entire week. He had to be so excited, but a transmission issue has retired that car. He's actually going to be driving a touring-prepped Subaru all-wheel drive car as well. Maybe Hayward can tune us in on whether or not that car has proper rain tires, but that car starting at the back is still a great driver, still
all-wheel drive in challenging conditions. Whether he makes it up towards the medal positions is one thing, but it's going to be fun for us to watch regardless. We also have one other car making a quick change. It's John Weisberg, who had mechanical issues all week, lost 2 motors in his MX-5. He said, you know what, I'm going to punt on this. I'm going to drive my wife's Touring 3 car. It's a BMW with rain tires and E46, and that car is going to be decent in these conditions. The only problem is that class with her driving races next, so he's got to be a little careful.
Yeah, he's got to be handing off that car in nice shape. There's no question about that as the cars move off of the false grid. And you know, you take a look here at this should be just fascinating because Joe Moser is a 2-time champ. He's the defending champ. And you heard Haywood talking about a little bit shorter wheelbase in that car than he might like in these conditions. Johan Schwartz is a superb talent. He has the Guinness Book record for drifting, so you know he's going to be okay a little sideways during the race. This is, though, and he's had a great season in Kip Van Steenberg's, that Porsche 944 that Kip normally runs, but he's been putting it together and running it for him. But Johan was the Southeastern Conference champion with 6 wins, 6 poles, 3 new track records, so it goes really well. It did in Kip's hands, it certainly is in Johan's, but first time in the wet for Johan in this car, so those opening few laps I would think would be a little exploratory.
Yeah, it's a less familiar car to him overall, but that introduce all these variables. I wouldn't trust there's a short list of people I might trust more than Johan to figure it out, but it's not very long at all. So Johan, I think, will be a very strong, if nothing else, just for the sake of being quite the wheelman. But then you add in the knowledge of Joe Moser. He's probably maybe even worse equipped in that car that is basically, as Hayward said, that orange CRX there. You kind of have to make it want to spin all the time to handle well in the dry. Now here in the wet, you can make a lot of setup changes. He'd probably crank that rear wing as much as possible, maybe add a bunch of front bar, make the car push. But we have a lot more variety behind that with some K-swapped engines in Hondas. We have some FRS chassis there. You see the turbo. That's going to be happy in this cool weather of that SRT4. I mean, we literally have everything to deal with here.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Let's take you through the starting lineup. As we said, Chip Herr will be starting in the back of the field in that Subaru. Also, John Weisberg will be starting at the back in the number 2 Redcom Labs T3 class BMW 300 CI. Then we will have the 113 of Thomas Wiegner. He's out of St. Charles, Illinois, in the Chicago region in a Subaru all-wheel drive in the 69. Starting in the 19 spot, actually the 18 spot will be Michael Reese from Brooklyn, New York region in the Honda S2000. Starting in the next spot will be the 75, James Schlechter from Moab, Utah, running in Colorado region in the Alien Force Racing Nismo Nissan 300ZX. Next up, one of the great names in racing, the number 17, Whitfield Gregg. You gotta love that. Out of Belleville, Washington, in the Flat Out Motorsports Mazda Miata. Starting in the 15 spot, the 68, Edwin Soto, and he's out of Orlando, Florida, in the Scuderia Krusty. I love that Race Factory Porsche Boxster S. Next up, number 71, Mark Johnson, out of Hedgeville, West Virginia, in the Washington, D.C. region, in the Jersey Mike's Nissan. Then the number 14 will start in the 13 spot, Anthony Pacelli, out of Maurertown, Virginia, WC, or the Western D.C. region as well, the Mid-Atlantic Speed and Custom Subaru, another all-wheel drive car. Next up, the 190 of David Fiorelli out of Coppell, Texas, in his Ford Mustang. And the number 92, it'll be John Schmidt out of the Ohio Valley region in the Redline Oil Honda Accord. Starting in the number 3, he'll start 10th, David Brand from Syosset, New York, in the Krug Speed Lotus Exige, one of the 2 here. In the second one is the number 72 of Anthony Girazzi from Glen, New York. He will be starting in the 9th spot. In the 8th spot, it'll be the 173 of Paul Azan from Miami, Florida, in a BMW. Starting in the 7th spot, the 80 of Jason Nazario out of Orlando in the El Paleo Racing Honda Civic. Then starting in the 6th spot will be the number 19 of Mark Liller in the Angry Sheep Motorsports Dodge Neon. That, I believe, is also an all-wheel drive car. A front-wheel drive, okay. In the 199, it'll be Jorge Ortiz out of Miami, Florida, in the Moss Race Team Toyota. Starting in the 4th spot, the 70 of Darin Treakle, Marshall, Virginia, Washington, D.C. region, the Treakle Insurance Agency BMW. Starting in the 3rd spot, 139, Jorge Ortiz out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, in the Race Factory Real Street Performance Honda Civic. And then, as we said, that front row of Joe Moser out of Dallas, Texas, going to defend his championship. He won it in 2016 as well in the King Motorsports Hoosier Carbotech Honda. And then number 4, Johan Schwartz, again, on the pole in the Van Steenberg Performance Porsche 944. I had the pleasure of calling Chip back in his heyday in World Challenge. I've had the pleasure of calling Johan more recently in World Challenge when he's won touring car championships, and I've called Joe Moser a lot at the run-ups. This is going to be a good one, Tomo.
A super good one as they come up to the green flag. Keep an eye out for that big boosty boy there in 6th place, Mark Liller's Turbo SRT4. But we've got a lot of variety, as we've talked incessantly about at this point. Coming to the green flag, wipers waving.
Absolutely. It is now under the control of Johan Schwartz and Moser on that front row. Watch for it. We're green. We are going for the gold here in STU. And Johan, using that little bit of grunt, easily just jumps out to the front here. But remember, that is a Porsche. It is rear-wheel drive. But again, we've talked about how good Johan is in all conditions. And there you called it. Look at the outside move by that Neon. Mark Lillard just sweeping around, 3-4 cars up into 3rd.
And Moser's got a great run there side by side up through 2 into 3. He's got a drop back just behind Johan Schwartz. Lillard didn't actually get a very good jump, but he really made it count in the braking zone. The best start actually was Jose Osiris Pena in that 199 FRS that we see. Whoa, big tank slap for Paul Hassan, and then it's straight off for Johan Schwartz.
Oh, and he just avoids the barrier down there. He's going to keep it going, but he's going to lose 15 at least spots, dropping back to the number 9, deep in the field right now. And that's a real problem for him. He's got a lot of work to do at this stage, and he is now back in that massive spray.
Wow, I wouldn't have put money on that. But then we have another off. That looks like the Jose Osiris Pena GT86 also having an off. We're side by side for Anthony Gerasi, who's got a killer start in that Lotus Exige. That car has traction control installed. It's an Old World Challenge car as well. That's going to be helping the mid-engine car put the power down. He's now chasing down another Old World Challenge car with Darin Treakle at the wheel.
Unbelievable. Yeah, the early run that he's got going here. And I think what may have contributed to Johan's issues is he does not have ABS in that Porsche, and I think that may have caught him out just a little bit. Not that big of a deal, obviously, in the dry, but in the wet, ABS is really nice to have.
And we didn't get a chance to talk much about the track, but turn 4, where Johan had that off, is the slickest spot on the track across its entire width. It's very easy to misjudge how fast you can actually go in there. But look at Mark Liller running down Joe Moser, light and turbo. That car in these conditions is in great condition. He's challenging for the lead.
Yeah, got a great run there. Realized he wasn't quite up there, but I think I don't think he was thinking really I'm going to go for the lead. He was testing the water there to see, and he could close that gap up in a hurry. He gets a little bit better exit out of Oak Tree in the next couple of laps. He can make that one work. He is all over the back right now.
And it's a little bit of a heavier car than that CRX. It's a longer wheelbase, more importantly, and that's going to make it more stable here in these conditions where you're going to want that. Looking back, the battle for 3rd is really hot with Darin Treakle leading the way in that E46 BMW, but he's got a ton of pressure from not only Anthony Gerasi, but also Jorge Ortiz, who's hanging in there in the EG Civic with, I believe, a K-motor in it. Look at the power.
Look at that. Just pulls to the outside. Now that is where we have seen it is slick out on that part of the track. He's got to be very, very careful. Turns in, he's got him around the outside. Now it's just a matter of making it stick. Moser going to try and use the inside. It's not going to work, and there goes Liller. And I think he's going to be able to, yep, there he goes. Now, does he overshoot? No, he does exactly what he wants, runs a little wide at the apex. And then this battle, look at this, Gerasi hanging right on there in that 4th spot, but Nazario.
We got it off. It is Jason Nazario. Doesn't get into the wall. I miscalled that car as Jorge Ortiz, but it was Nazario. That was a great challenge for 3rd place, but just overdoes it a bit.
So that puts Gerasi now up into that 3rd spot. Here the blue car and a spin for the number 17 of Whitfield Gregg in the Mazda Miata. And right now he is just parked right in the middle of the track. That is going to be a problem if he can't get that started. They're going to have very little option here. See, they're going to give him every opportunity. Let's see if we can see what happened here. It's right there, just came around on him all by his own. And got it stopped in the right direction, but I wonder if he stalled there. He just locked everything up.
Gets it going again. We saw it had power, so that's good that he could refire it. We're going to stay green flag, but your leader right now is Mark Liller in the Dodge Neon SRT4 out of Maryland. Then Joe Moser runs second, and then now third is Anthony Gerasi, who did not have a smooth week in qualifying at all. That's an understatement, but moving all the way up to third now with that Exige having qualified 10th. Unfortunately, his teammate David Brand also had an incident in qualifying, and it looks like they weren't able to get that car repaired for the race. Did not start, but we could have seen a really good charge for both of those Exiges.
All right, and at this stage now, looking at it, it looks like Darin Treakle has dropped back into 5th as Jason Nazario was able to slip around him as well. Indeed, and then behind Nazario, there is Jorge Ortiz, and then look who's next up, the number 9 of Chip Herr from the very back of a 21-car field, and he's up into 8th.
In a car he's never driven before. That's absolutely wild. Look at the rain line for that driver. He definitely knows where he's going in the rain in this track. We're going to have to keep an eye out for sector times. Chip actually set the personal best sector 2.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it, go.
Yeah, Nazario all crossed up, went right around the outside of Anthony Gerasi, but then carried a little bit more speed than he was expecting. I think found a little grip, and then got trapped in the outside part of the track as it starts to flatten out, and a big slide, but made it work and has made that pass stick. He's now up into 4th.
Best part about those front-wheel drive cars, when you'd overdo it just a bit, you put your foot down and it pulls it back straight. Everybody figured out the braking line for the first corner as Chip Herr pops out on Darin Treakle and is going to easily outbrake the BMW, but he's on the dry line. He's got to make that corner. Looks like he made it stick.
Looks like he did all right with that, and then the 139 of Ortiz right there behind him. And just taking a look here, Chip Herr, his last lap, a 2:33. The only guy faster was Mark Liller, up with clear visibility. Chip Herr right now is absolutely flying. And then look at this group of cars having a phenomenal battle. John Schmidt, Pizzelli, and Johan right there trying to come back up. You can see the back end stepping out. This is tough duty for him in that car.
Yeah, that car does not look happy at all. And Johan's got to be very frustrated with knowing it's probably not setting him up for success right now, as you can see just how nervous it was coming off those corners. Again, not only was Chip Herr the second fastest car on track with visibility, but he was passing cars that entire time, as it looks like we may be going to a full course caution.
It appears that is the safety vehicle, the Mazda, which gives us an opportunity to say a big thank you to the folks from Mazda for presenting our broadcast here. And there it is, full course caution coming out on the track as Mark Liller had built up about a 3.5-second lead, but that is going to go away. And not sure what this caution was for, if there is a car out there that's created a problem or if it's something weather related. Apparently it was over in the turn 11 part of the spot, which is the entrance into the Oak Tree turn. And they waited and waited, apparently had to eventually throw the yellow, and of course, as Murphy's Law would dictate, you throw the yellow and then that car figures it out and drives off. And but now you have to go through that process. When a problem here for the number 17, that is Whitfield Gregg. We saw him spin before, and I wonder if he doesn't have some sort of electric issue in that car, because it sat there forever, he gets it going, and now it looked like he just drove it off.
Yeah, the other good news about this full course caution, if we are now clear track, they actually have 3 different safety cars ready to go at any time. So they could kind of dispatch the safety car mid-track. You saw it pick the field up in the S's. If we have it clean by start-finish, we'll go back to green.
Which is great. I love that. It preserves a little bit of the margins that somebody has driven hard to build here. While we're under this caution, I think this is a nice opportune time to be able to thank all of the volunteers. This is a club, obviously, so it's nothing but volunteers, but especially the corner workers who are out and around this track, out in the elements, out in harm's way, providing information assistance to all these drivers. A great group, obviously, out there waving those double yellows for these drivers just into the part of the track called the roller coaster, and it is that. It almost has kind of a feel as you tip into it of it almost being corkscrewish.
Finding myself, it's a bit puzzling. We see Moser is first, Chip Herr is second on the grid right now. Then it's Gerasi. Liller is back to 5th. So in the last moments of green flag running, it seems the field got shuffled quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that would be great news for Chip Herr, who's now basically been gifted being right with the leader.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. Scoring still is showing Liller. Now, we'll wait until they come by start-finish, and then it all might shift. On the other hand, and this is purely speculative, was Liller the one who spun it up in turn 11? We will find out when we come back. Since we have an early caution, we're going to say thanks to the wonderful partners that make this broadcast possible. We'll be right with you.
Focus, guys. We're in a race to the finish, okay?
Here's where the rubber meets the road.
These initiatives move the needle, like, at all?
Well, let's shift gears a minute.
We're really kind of at the apex here.
We need to put the pedal to the metal. We need to nail those hairpin turns, cross that finish line, and take that checkered flag. Woo!
Hit the track with the world's largest motorsports calendar, track day insurance, and more. Haggerty. Let's drive together.
Introducing the first ever Mazda CX-50.
We are back, everybody, and as you can see, along with the double yellows, now we have a black flag that is coming out, and the report is there is some oil down on the track, and of course, when you've got a scenario where it's wet like this, then you put oil down as well, that becomes really problematic, and they're always going to err on the side of caution here, and so we'll try and fill you in just a little bit, but black flag coming out, and that's going to sort of put this race on hold a little bit here.
And at the risk of speculation, the only car we saw retire was Whitfield Gray. So beyond that, we don't really know what's been going on other than the first 2 laps of this race were wild as expected. Joe Moser takes the lead after Johan Schwartz puts the car off in turn 4. Meanwhile, we're watching the battles for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and quietly but emphatically, Chip Herr drives from last on the grid to what is now 2nd place, right behind Joe Moser, and has indicated, based on what we've seen so far, that that's the fastest car on track.
Yeah, and the other big question is, how did Mark Liller end up in the 5th spot? And I wonder if it wasn't a combination that we've seen here. Whitfield Gregg having a mechanical issue and putting oil down, and at the same time Liller looping it up quickly in turn 11. And maybe that's why he lost some of those spots. It's all speculative at this point. All we know is the black flag is out because of oil down on top of the water that is down on top of the track. That's a nasty combination.
Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous situation that's absolutely worth avoiding under any circumstance, whether this was IndyCar for a giant thing or a club race with everyone here on their own dime. This is it's certainly a good call. The question is how much of the track is covered, and how quickly can we get back to the green flag racing? Because I know there's at least 3 or 4 cars that aren't happy with where they're at, potentially up to 17 or 18 of them, the whole grid.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a really good point. Is the oil in a localized spot, which will be a in quotes, relatively quick cleanup, or does it run for a fair chunk of the track, and that can take time?
Yeah, and the other person who, I mean, Joe Moser's got to be a little bit content with that, because he was definitely off pace a bit, definitely from Mark Liller and from also Chip Herr. Those two were kind of in a league of their own on raw pace starting this race off. So Moser doesn't seem to have the setup underneath him that he really wants for these conditions. Now we can talk about when you go to a black flag, especially if they choose to red flag this race once they go onto the pit lane. Drivers can touch their cars, but the moment you touch the car, you go to the back of the grid. So is someone like Johan Schwartz, who's already pretty much there, is it worth trying to dial that car in for the conditions a little bit more versus someone like Joe Moser, who, yeah, maybe he knows that he wants the car a little bit different, but if you touch it, he's at the back. I would take the risk to stay where I'm at.
I would think so, yeah. If you're up near the front of this group, visibility, track position is going to be really important. And it's not like he hasn't, Moser, Herr, those guys, it's not like they haven't been showing some pretty decent pace. But if you're struggling, like clearly Johan is, and we know Johan's ability behind the wheel. And but like we said, this is his first time driving that car in the wet. He is, as superb as he is, obviously you have no feel, you don't know what to expect, you're just trying to suss it out. That's a big ask, and this is going for a national championship as well, so it's a lot on the line.
Yeah, and the best thing to do is just be patient and feel what comes to you, whether it's the car, whether it's the field that you're racing around. the difference in a drive that goes from last to first in 2 laps is not that different from putting in a good qualifying lap if you're just patient. If you're trying to force it, that's when things can go a little bit wrong. As we saw, to use an example, Johan Schwartz having to force that Porsche through turn 1. You could see how nervous it was about 20 minutes ago at this point. And it didn't want to be forced. If you have to force it, it's not going to come. But Chip Herr knows enough from his experience. All I've got to do is see what comes to me and do the best that I can when it's presented.
Yeah, and I mean, what a drive by Chip Herr. You know, before we even came on the air, we were going, you know, if Chip had started where he was, I'd say this was going to be his race. But at the back of the pack, yeah, he just absolutely flogged that thing. And it's stunning because, as you said, first time he's driven the car.
Yeah.
And to just be able to do that is staggering.
First time that we know, at least. I didn't hear any news from that. So a couple other cars I saw that are worth noting. David Fiorelli was our pole sitter at Road America in 2020 in a supercharged Scion FRS. And that car was very, very heavy. It showed no longevity on the pace, and he ended up losing that race about halfway, or that position about halfway through, to Paul Hassan, who I'm seeing is also missing from our grid here in the running order. But David Fiorelli with an EcoBoost Mustang now in the 8th position, moved up from probably a poorer qualifying effort than he really would have liked to have seen. He qualified 13th, but the conditions for that EcoBoost Mustang looking pretty good, sitting there in 8th. And then right behind him, John Schmidt in an Accord Coupe has moved up to 9th. That's a really good effort from that car. Pretty different car, too.
It is indeed. So at this stage, under a very early black flag, only 3 laps in, it's Moser leading from Chip Herr, Anthony Girazzi in 3rd, Jason Nazario in 4th, and Mark Liller, up into the 5th spot. And we are getting word now that this could be a relatively long delay. And so we are going to pause here, and we will be back with you as soon as we get word that the race for the gold in STU will continue. Well, welcome back, everybody, here to a sodden and oiled down VIRginia International Raceway here as part of the SCCA Runoffs. And unfortunately, due to the delay, and it's going to continue to be a bit lengthy, there was no option for the stewards here but to now end up checkering the STU class, which is a real shame, obviously. It was a class that was promising to be one of a really, really combative battle out there on the track. It was going to be fun. And Tomo, you've actually been in communication with some of the people. Explain what's happening.
Yeah, I don't want to steal any of Hayward's thunder, but we definitely had a lot of mixed feelings from all the drivers on the pit lane waiting for that, or not hoping for the green flag to come back out. But again, we were told coming into the event, no matter what, we would try really, really hard to make sure that there was a 2-lap shootout for every single race, if possible. And it sounds like this oil situation is far too extensive. We did luckily get 3 laps under green flag, or partially 2.5, I would say, green flag laps here, in which there was a lot of drama already. Joe Moser moved from 2nd to 1st after Johan Schwartz, who we heard was on very old rain tires, just not really prepared based on these conditions with the freshness of those tires. He slid off. Joe inherits the lead. Meanwhile, Chip Herr in the background is, well, you'll hear, and ultimately makes his way up to 2nd. Anthony Girazzi made his way to 3rd, but there was a lot of drama for a lot of drivers in that very short 2.5 lap sprint that this race will end up being. As you can see just how many hands on deck from VIR. I'm sure there are other corner workers from SCCA and anybody they can get out there to make sure this track is in good shape for the rest of the races today. Yeah,
and you can see they're working on that sort of center in area right now up in that turn. So, you know, whenever you've got oil on a track in any scenario, you've got to be very, very careful with it. But when it's oil on top of water, it is downright diabolical, and we have to do what is the best thing in terms of the safety. And as you can see, the trees are starting to move around a lot, and we anticipate, as the checker now officially flies, the rain to be picking up a little bit too. So we're getting everything thrown into it here this weekend.
Yeah, you're going to hear three very different perspectives
Yes.
when we throw down to Hayward to get those podium interviews, but it is going to be another national championship in STU for Joe Moser in that orange CRX.
And he basically defends, after having won it last year. Let's take a look at the brief highlights we have, and you can see Johan right there in the Porsche on the inside. But look at Liller in that silver Dodge Neon. Had a decent start, but then got deep into the brakes, swept around the outside there, and jumped up into third.
Yeah, and Johan got away with a couple of corners on those older rain tires, but got a surprise when he got to turn 4, ended up falling off the track. As it looks like we may get back to our replay here, but the rain certainly picking up. Here's that look. As you can see, Mark Liller, keep an eye on that silver SRT4. That was a big move early on. He made his way up to the lead eventually, but at the front it was Moser and Johan. Now coming into turn 3, watch the Porsche. He just gets, you can tell he's just not comfortable, goes to the brakes, and will end up kind of shooting off track right, just no steering on that car.
Yep, old tires, no ABS, and he did a brilliant job not to end up down into that barrier down there, but lost a huge amount of time, and that, of course, put Moser up into the lead, and had Liller sitting there in second. Meanwhile, Chip Herr was making an astounding run up through the pack. At the end of the first lap, had gone from dead last to 8th. There he is in that number 9, and there you can see Johan, how far back he had dropped.
Yeah, just missed Johan coming back on track there, but this was the pass for the lead. Mark Liller, commanding pass on the brakes around the outside of turn 1 in that SRT4 over Moser. Now this is lap 2, and he will put the foot down in that light and torquey SRT4 to take the lead. So that's where we kind of left things off. There was a slide off the track for Liller that caused him to lose the lead, slide back to 5th, which is what put kind of floundering Joe Moser back into the lead for what will now become his national championship.
All right, and let's get down to Hayward with our national champ.
Joe, you told me on grid that this thing was going to spin on you in a heartbeat. Short wheelbase, a lot of power, but there was a spin in front of you that was pretty fortuitous. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, on the start, obviously Johan in that Porsche is an unbelievable driver, pro guy, but he had a bear of a car, and he went straight off in turn 3 on the start. So I had a little bit of an open track, and I don't love this car in the wet, but made some changes and got it hooked up slightly.
This is your 4th championship, obviously never won like this.
No, this is an unexpected one. In a hurricane, remnants of one, 3 laps of racing. Obviously, probably wouldn't have held on to this one if it was green flag from start to finish, but I'm real happy with it.
Well, somebody is smiling on you today. Congratulations on the national championship. We'll let you get to the podium. We're going to grab Chip while we're live and just keep going. Hey, Chip! Chip is our 2nd place finisher. Chip, if I understood correctly, when you came in, you didn't understand you'd made it to 2nd. You just knew you were passing cars.
It was like Mario Kart. There was like little orange peels and guys were spinning out. I got to thank the Baselli family. My car wouldn't go in gear this morning, and it's been a really tough year. But I can't thank them enough. Carbertech and Hoosier, we still had the same equipment on the car. It's been a backup car to help me qualify after my crash and pit race. And it's kind of Cinderella story. I mean, I needed 3 more turns to get Moser, but what a great guy and a great drive, and I just needed a couple more turns. But I wanted a couple more laps, too.
I was struck in the black flag condition with everybody getting out of their cars, checking each other, talking to each other, high fives. Do you want to go back? Do you not want to go back? Talk about the camaraderie of this class.
You know, it's a fantastic class. The cars are really, there's actually a wide variety of cars and manufacturers, which actually makes it hard to compete and to make them competitive because of the different cars. And I think the guys, we're all here because we're car people, and there's a lot of experience in the group, and I think we're gaining traction with STO and STU. And I went to the board meeting. I tried to be a part of it, because I really think it can be big, like 40-car fields. So I hope I put a show on. It's a shame for the oil, but this last 2 years has been fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. Congratulations. And if we can get a shot of it, you can actually see where the car that dumped the oil came back into the paddock. It's about a 3-foot wide path here in paddock. I can't imagine what they're trying to clean up out there right now.
All right, thanks very much, Hayward. Yeah, that's great insight. And for Chip, as you said, I didn't even know where I was. I was coming up through the field, and he always puts on a show. And like I said, I announced him a lot, probably 15 years ago. And I love the guy, but I also hate him because I look 15 years older, He looks just like he did back then when he was running, man. It's just not fair.
Yeah, what I take away from that is Hayward mentioned the camaraderie. No hard feelings between those two. I think Joe knows that he was struggling. Chip knew that he had every chance to win, but definitely no animosity about the situation that just unfolded for this national championship race. Both of them happy to just have the chance to be racing and have their cars. I forgot actually Chip had said that he qualified most of the season into this event with that Subaru because of car problems with the Audi. So it was more familiar territory than we thought, but still you could tell he's just happy to have been able to get out there. And an extra shout out again to Anthony Pacelli. It's their backup car.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to hand someone the keys to your car and let them go race it.
It does. It does. There's no question. You can see all the cleanup continuing there. For Johan Schwartz, I can actually, I really feel for him with that issue because the first rain race I ever did when I was racing, I had old rain tires as one of the options, or new, slick tire, not slicks, but the DOT shave tires. And I said, well, let's do the rains. They were bricks. It was awful, and I really feel for what he's dealing with, and the lack of ABS and everything. So tough go for the pole sitter, but for Joe Moser defending a championship, Chip Herr another medal, and Anthony Girazzi bringing home the bronze. It was a bit unique, but that wraps up our coverage here of STU. And I think Chip was right. This class is fascinating. It's fun. It can be big. And so we certainly are going to be looking forward to the 2023 runoffs and what STU can do under slightly different conditions. But that wraps up our coverage. Big thanks for Hayward being down there, providing us information always. To you, Tom, always a treat. I'm Greg Kramer. Thanks so much for joining us here at the 59th running of SCCA's National Championship Runoffs. See you next time.
Why race? Because it's in our blood. A love of driving that pushes us as hard on the road as it does on the track. It's why we reinvented the Roadster and put a piece of it into every car we make. It's why we refine, rethink, and refine again. And it's why we'll always engineer to your heart's BPM, not simply an engine's RPM. Why race? Why?